Hello, BookTube. All right, in the course of my videos today, while I've been nattering on to you and complaining and stem winding and ranting, I've also been slowly building a Friday Reads, an actual Friday Reads video of the type that other booktubers make so well. A video where they talk about their reading history throughout the week and show you the books that are on their immediate radar for the coming weekend. I love Friday Reads videos, and I always feel bad that I don't make them on this channel in the proper way. So I'm going to try and do that today. So at the time that I'm making this video, from this time last Friday, I have read 21 books. And it was a very good week. There were a number of books in there that I really liked. In fact, this was probably the strongest reading week of the new year so far. And I'm planning this weekend, tonight and Saturday and Sunday, to read a lot. I'm going to read a lot. I have a Friday read list of books that are on my docket for this weekend. There are 9 of them. And I want to stress once again, especially for those of you who are new to the channel, that I am not talking out my sock. I read very fast, I sleep very little, and I do nothing else. Imagine if, God forbid, you broke a leg and were laid up all weekend long without... Let's say you were laid up all weekend long, so you couldn't go anywhere. And also, let's say that, I know it's a little too much to ask, almost science fiction, but let's say that you had pre-internet powers of concentration, so that your phone wasn't distracting you for 20 minutes at a time every 20 minutes. Let's say you were able to concentrate. If the zillennials among you will Google the word concentrate, you will see what it means. It does not mean binge watch a show for 10 hours on your tablet. That is not, in fact, concentrating. That is the opposite of concentrating. It is actually eroding your ability to concentrate. I'm talking about reading. Imagine if you not only broke a leg so that you couldn't go anywhere all weekend long, but that you were perfectly comfortable losing yourself for 5, 6, 7 hours at a time to reading. If that were true, then 9 books would no more be out of your range than it's out of mine. That is what I'm going to do this weekend. Aside from freedom moments where I walk the bean, feed the bean, play with the bean, and she needs less and less of that as time goes on. She wants less and less of it. She sleeps a lot, and I've noticed that it's been increasing here as we approach her 3rd year. Aside from that, all I'm going to do all weekend long is read. So I have 9 books that I want to show you, some of which you have already seen as we have been building my Friday Reads TBR in real time. This first one I don't think you have, but it does follow a trend that we've seen in 2020 books so far, which is translated literature. I've been getting an enormous amount of translated literature. Maybe the publishing industry is shooting its wad now and there won't be any from March until the end of the year, but it could be that it's a very international, very cosmopolitan year for publishing. And this one's a bit of a surprise. This is Henning Mankell. This is The Rock Blaster. This is his first novel in its English language translation for the first time. This is from 1970 or something like that, isn't it? 1973. This came out in 1973. Now it's been translated to English for the first time. The year is 1911, and a young rock blaster named Oskar Johansson is almost killed in an accident. In spite of serious injuries, however, Oskar survives, and after a long recovery, resumes his work. Decades after, Oskar, now retired and summering on a Swedish archipelago, befriends a young man who teases out his thoughts on his work, his accident, his injuries, his marriage, and his dreams. Oskar's life is woven out of fragments and voices and images and episodes that, taken together, provide a sharp and precise picture of working-class life in Sweden. It's a lovely, understated thing, and it's not long at all. And I've never read it. Of course, I've never read it. So that's on the agenda for this weekend. This next one we've seen. This is the finished copy of it, and I think it's a January release, and I admit I was prompted to it by a different book. This is Adam Nicholson's The Making of Poetry, Coleridge, the Wordsworths, and their Year of Marvels. And I haven't read it yet, and it's a long and detailed and apparently very poetry-saturated, verse-saturated account of Wordsworth and the Coleridges. A familiar story, a familiar narrative. I've read many books on the subject. And I confess I might have let this one drift off into February, except that I just got Jonathan Bates. I got an advance copy of Jonathan Bates' new book on Wordsworth. And it comes out in April, late April or early May. it's a little too far ahead when I've got too many books immediately on my publishing docket to get to it. I would feel guilty if I read it early now. It's close to tempting me, but I'm not going to do it, and this is scratching that itch. This got pushed ahead because of that Bate Wordsworth book. Although I'm sure Adam Nicholson is really good. I'm sure this is going to be good on its own. Then this next one we've also seen. We saw it today as I was slowly building my Friday reads. This is by Tanvi Madan. This is Fateful Triangle. This is going to be an original paperback. It's going to be a trade paperback original about the influence of China on U.S.-India relationships in the 20th century. And the sort of dance that was done between Indian politicians, Chinese power makers, and American presidents, and American secretaries of state. And this is going to be a $36 paperback original release. So I don't know what you're going to see in your bookstores, but the period is of intense interest to me for a number of different reasons. I will see. I admit I'll be looking at it fairly sharply for its depiction of Indian politics, which I'm a little sensitive about because American writers tend not to do a very good job. But this author is a senior fellow and director of the India Project in the foreign policy program of the Brookings Institute. His work explores India's role in the world and its foreign policy, focusing in particular on India's relationships with China and the United States. So this author is probably not going to have any of the provincial blinkers that tend to bother me. I'm looking forward to it. It's right around the corner. It's in early February. Then the next thing is a reread, to put it mildly. It is a reread. It's something I've read, I don't know, 100 million times. This is The Legion of Superheroes. And this is from the archive editions, which I don't think DC Comics makes anymore. I don't think they make archive editions anymore. This is archive edition volume 11 with a Dave Cockrum cover. Some of you who are comic book fans will recognize Dave Cockrum's artwork because he originated the all-new, all-different X-Men. This is when he was much younger, and he was an artist for the Legion of Superheroes, which is a DC superhero team that's 50 years old. It was created 50 years ago. They are a group of teenagers. I know they don't look like that on the cover, but they're a group of superpowered teenagers 1,000 years in the future who band together to fight crime and injustice in 30th century. And they bring Superboy, not the son of Superman and Lois Lane, who's the current star of a DC comic book, but Clark Kent, Superman when he was a boy in Smallville. They bring Superboy forward in time 1,000 years to join their group and have adventures with them. They started out as just a bit. Otto Binder wrote them as just a bit in a Superboy story, and fans loved them, wanted more of them. Eventually they got a backup feature of their own that became more popular than Superboy's adventures on their own, so they got their own comic, and that's happened many times. And the Legion has been relaunched. DC Comics has relaunched the Legion just recently. Only Wildfire looks the same in the new Legion, the Brian Michael Bendis Legion. Only Wildfire, this guy, looks anything like that. All the others look completely different. My jury is still largely out on the Brian Michael Bendis Legion. I don't like any kind of comic book production that has one person as its marquee, because I've always thought comic books were more of a team event. These are from the 1970s, and they are written by Cary Bates, and most of this book is drawn by Mike Grell, who went on to superstardom as the writer and artist for a thing called Warlord. That never really did it for me, but his work on the Legion is very good, often unintentionally, and somewhat hilariously homoerotic, but also his teenagers kind of look often like teenagers. He's got a very good eye for action. I've read these things many times. This volume 11, compiles a few key Legion stories. I think there are probably the 1970s costumes. Mike Grell had a thing about legs, so his legs are often the huge piece of real estate. But there's a lot of stories in here, and the reason why is because most of these took place as short 8 or 7 page backup stories, so you can fit a lot of them into one volume. But very colorful stuff, very, 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 very dramatic stuff, and also Mike Grell. Let me see if I can get you an example. Mike Grell also had delusions of grandeur when it came to his artwork. So there's one story here in which Supergirl who was also partly came forward in time and was a member of the Legion and was sweet on Brainiac 5, the Legion's resident greenskin super genius, and he was sweet on her. And there's a story here where she apparently convinces him to leave the Legion and strike out on their own. And when she is revealed in the story to be a superpowered robot, Mike Grell can't resist the pietà. He does. That's Brainiac looking at his robot. Only it's in an exact homage to Michelangelo's Pietà. And the rest of the issue. See, it's very hyperdramatic stuff. Very Gil Kane-esque. Look up the nose art angles. I love it. I love almost every era of the original Legion. So I'll be reading this weekend. There's no excuse for it, but I will be. Then a book that we saw just recently. We saw it today. I've added it to my list for this weekend. This is An Everyday Hero by Laura Trentham. It's a classic two headstrong people meet cute and fall in love romance novel. It just happened to be a trade paperback. It's going to be a $17 trade paperback. This is the form it's going to take, but I'm all for it. Won't take long to read it all. And the next one is a debut. We've also seen it today. It's a debut thriller. It's Death in the Family. This is Tessa Weigert's debut and the first in a Shanna Merchant novel that has all the hallmarks of a classic police procedural thriller where the murder is on an island, the murderer is still among us, the murderer is killing again, there's a storm coming in, it's all that sort of stuff. So the elements are familiar, and we'll just see. We'll just see what kind of a job the author does doing it. It won't take long to read. Then the next one is a reread. It will be a loving and adoring reread. This was a fantastic book. One of the strongest new works of history so far that I've read this year. This is Mary Beth Norton's 1774, The Long Year of Revolution. Her book about the long and torturous movement towards the American Revolution in 1776. Her unspoken contention throughout this book is that 1774 is the year when the revolution became inevitable, when there was no chance that it was not going to happen, and all that was left was to make sides and try and picture what it would be like. It's got all of her strengths as a historian. Those of you who read her great book on the Salem witch trials will already know. Great characters, great pacing, tons and tons of fantastic research. I'm going to be reviewing this for a large audience, or actually not a very large audience, but a very dedicated audience. And I'm going to pour over it this week. I'm going to give a good solid afternoon to make sure that I know this book backwards and forwards before I write about it. Then the next one is another debut. Always nice to have some debuts on my Friday reads that I've never made. And this is something we've seen already. We saw it today. This is Justin Call's debut, Master of Sorrows, a big fat fantasy novel. That is his twist on the stereotypical fantasy chosen one cliche, where one young person is snatched from obscurity, has an amazing destiny, has an amazing power set, and must learn the ways of his destiny from a wise old mentor. Only turns that on its head by having the person be essentially Darth Vader, this being essentially what would happen if we were watching Sauron turn evil. So all the usual cliches apply, but they're turned on their head. Well, I'm going to see. That is inventive enough, certainly, for me to dive in. I've had the advanced copy of this and haven't touched it. I feel a little guilty about that because I think this is coming right up. So that will be another debut on the list. And then the last thing of my Friday reads, these will be things that I read, but this may not be everything. That if I go, for instance, book hunting tomorrow, I may get something, or more than one thing, that I want to bump ahead. but in the meantime, this is the last one. This is a kid's book. I don't know that I have any details on this. I know that I'm pretty sure that it's not out yet. But anyway, this is written by Miranda Kristovanikov, and illustrated by Jill Calder. And it's called The Ocean, Exploring Our Blue Planet. It's a big, oversized thing. These nice color washes. It starts off with, it gives you all the different ocean environments. So you have coastlines, estuaries, bays, the surface of the ocean, forests, salt marshes, the depths of the ocean, far, far below the reach of light, all that sort of stuff. All the different oceanographic environments are in here with big color pages and simple descriptions so that you can take your little one right through the whole thing. It's not going to take me more than a minute or two to read it, But I'm going to hunker down with it as well. I've mentioned on this channel a few times, when it comes to kids' book, I tend to slow way down and really save them, pay attention to them. And not only because I get more out of them that way, but also because I will be vetting this thing to see whether or not I want to read it to a group of kids. I spend time reading to kids, and I vet some of these new books to see if they are good candidates for that. I think this one is a self-evidently good candidate for that. The kids are always fascinated by the ocean and the things that live in it. But anyway, there you go. That is my Friday Reads, which I partially built in front of you, and now I get to be a real boy. And now I get to be accepted by the cool kids at their mean girls table because I have made a normal Friday Reads video in which I described, at least in rough outline, my reading history for the week and showed you the books that are next on my docket. There. I did it. So I'm going to call this proudly Friday Reads. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.